All right, let's get started. Hi everyone. Stop that. Such a catchy tune. Um, my talk is Junichi Masuda and the Intrinsic Sound of Pokemon, and more about this is from the Video Game Music Institute, the premier place for online video game music education. We have a lot of courses and content there, so check it out when you can. As for myself, I'm Kermit Mitchell. Hi, I also go by Kenji, and I am a game developer. So I'm a software engineer. I've been developing video games for several years now, specialized in Unity and C Sharp. Um, and I also do amateur composition for video games as well. I've always been into video game music. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and as such, I'm entrepreneurial as well, and I'm an educator. I teach video game music composition and analysis now. And these pretty much just say the same things. As for my favorite music, I love Junichi Masuda of Pokemon, which is the discussion for today, Yoko Shimomura for Mario and Luigi RPGs, and Grant Kirkhope from Banjo-Kazooie, among many other different games. So I wanted to start with the history of Pokemon because it's important to know where we started. But just to start, like, how successful is Pokemon, right? So this is a graph, and it shows the amount of money that Pokemon as a franchise has made, and you see that it's on the top, right? And these are very big brands. So this is the highest grossing media franchise of all time. It's not an easy feat, so it's incredible. And possibly the music has something to do with that. So the word Pokemon or the phrase Pokemon comes from pocket monsters in Japan. Pogeto monster is what they would say in Japanese. And we have the contraction, it's called Pokemon, pocket monsters. So in terms of who created Pokemon, right? We know Pokemon was made by Game Freak, a studio founded by these three people. And you have Satoshi, Ken, and Junichi Masuda. Satoshi was the CEO and the core game designer. Ken Sugimori was the artist and is responsible for character design, and then Junichi Masuda was important for graphics, music, sound programming, and game design. So some of the nice effects that we had in Gen 2, we can attribute to him as well. So more about Junichi Masuda, my favorite game composer. So similar to me, he's also a game developer and a game programmer. And he makes music for Pokemon. He's been doing that for nearly 2 decades. He's also a music producer and produces and directs the Pokemon series as well. So he's a businessman responsible for Game Freak's operations when it comes to making important gameplay decisions for the business. And like musically, he's not formally trained in music composition, right? He didn't go to music school like some people did, and yet he's been able to write incredible music, as we'll discuss today. He actually studied computer programming like I did in college. So we know him as the face of Pokemon, right? Anytime there's a major announcement, you see this guy, and well, maybe not recently, but you've seen him all the way up until Gen 8. When it comes to his music, we're going to look at some of the influences that shaped his music. So we have to start with chiptune. So chiptunes are a style of electronic music, right? And they're made with special sound chips with the fundamental waveforms. So what are those? We have like pulse waves, sine waves, square waves, triangle waves, sawtooth waves. And the main idea is that you have limited voices, and these different waves have different timbre, so that affects how the sounds come out of the sound chips when you hear it. So the duty cycle, when it changes, just so that you know that's how you can change the timbre of some of these. So just to play some of them, like that's a clean sine wave. That's a square wave. That's a triangle wave. One of those is looping and it shouldn't be, but that's okay. But those are like ways that you can make chiptune music. And back in the day, they had something like a Fami tracker where the sound programmers would plug in like hexadecimal codes that would correspond to different instruments, different note, different pitch values. And the main thing here is that they only had 3 sound channels. One noise channel for like percussive sounds, and a sampler that was barely ever used because it took up a lot of memory. It's really hard to work with. But the core thing is 3 sound channels, and they all had different timbre. And that makes it easy to kind of look at Baroque music as a starting point. So Junichi Masuda was inspired by Baroque music, which is mostly known for counterpoint and contrapuntal techniques like sequences and imitation. It overall has a dense texture. And we know figures like Vivaldi and Bach are some of the prominent figures of that time period. And Masuda actually said about Bach, like, the NES only had 3 sound channels, so I would study a lot of the 3 voice compositions, like those from Bach, and try to figure out how to make that kind of music on the NES. Bach's musical sounds very beautiful without being complex, and that's from Junichi Masuda. So he was aware of classical music. He actually loved Western classical music in the common practice period. And he also has some inspiration from classical music as well. Like Junichi Masuda borrowed from many different times in the common practice period. So from here, he took things like symmetrical phrasing. So if we listen to like Mozart, so notice how each part is kind of like symmetrical, the antecedent and the consequent. They like mimic each other in a way. And if you look at some of Masuda's compositions, like the Pokemon Center theme, right? It goes da 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 da, antecedent, da 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 da, consequent. So it's very symmetrical, and he definitely borrowed from classical music in that sense. We won't talk too much about this in this lecture, but he has influence from Russian folk music as well. So things like the umpa rhythm, ritardando, accelerando, and very fast tempos, these are all common in traditional folk Russian music. And you can hear this actually in the bicycle themes from the first 2 generations, from Sovko, from Burn Tower, and Gold and Silver. And we explore more of that in a class setting. And the Romantic era, he also borrowed from as well when it comes to chromaticism. So this is Flight of the Bumblebee from Rimsky-Korsakov and then arranged by Rachmaninoff. And what I want you to listen to and look at is all of the different pitches and how it makes you feel when you listen to it. So it's kind of like an unsettling feeling, a lot of tension, a lot of chromaticism. This is a very long chromatic run, which were common in romantic music like Liszt, Chopin, Rimsky-Korsakov, etc. So we don't need to play the whole thing, but it's a very unsettling feeling, these chromatic runs, which we'll explore more. And I don't know if you see a trend here, but Masuda really liked Russian composers, right? So Stravinsky, Shostakovich, Holst, I don't think was Russian, but these are 21st century composers as well. And Stravinsky specifically is Masuda's favorite composer. And there's certain tracks, especially in the first generation, that he's influenced by, like Mount Moon, which we talk more about in class. Here I wanted to show you a clip of some of the dark despair that Shostakovich can make with his music. Masuda listened to a lot of edgy music. So the thing with this piece, there's a lot of chromaticism in this piece as well, and the main motif that's used is imitated across several different voices constantly, and that's a technique that Masuda does in his music that we'll explore. Right, so you hear the imitation of that main motif in the different voices. It's a very dramatic piece. I definitely encourage you to listen to the full thing when you have time. That's from Shostakovich, which is his second favorite composer. So, like in summary, like Masuda has many different influences, right? He has a lot of influence from the common practice period, classical music, Baroque music, Russian folk, Russian composers of the Romantic era. His favorite genre of music actually is techno, believe it or not. He grew up, or not grew up, but in his teenage years and young adult years, he listened to metal groups like Slipknot. He listened to alt rock like Linkin Park. He played trombone when he was in high school, so that's why you have some of the marching band elements in Pokemon music. So that's a just overall just quick summary of Masuda's influences. But let's talk more specifically about his techniques that he's doing. So I mentioned counterpoint earlier, and what is counterpoint or contrapuntal music, right? So it's when you have two or more like interweaving melodies working together to create a more elaborate sound. So for instance, when we look at this piece, this is from Wild Battle, right? We have two melodies going on in the bass. This is do, 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 right? So that's the main melody that we'll hear later. But then we have the counter melody here. Do, 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 right? Suspension. So you're able to have multiple different melodies at the same time, and it makes the music way more intricate and dense, which he liked from the Baroque era and also like Shostakovich. So these are more examples, and we'll listen to them. It can be simple, like the example that we looked at, or it could be more complex, like this. Like this is from Generation 2, which is my favorite soundtracks, OST from Pokemon. So you can see the main thing with the counterpoint, it's not about the contrary motion or oblique motion or what you've studied. It's more about when he has longer held notes, he makes the counter melody have shorter duration so that each voice has its own time to shine. And other times he syncs up the voices like here in contrary motion. So we'll hear more about this. So I just wanted to bring it up first because he uses counterpoint a lot. And chromaticism, like we just discussed in the Romantic era, just a show of hands, like how many people are musicians here? Okay, good. Okay, so some of this stuff is not too foreign, but for everyone else, just stick around. Trust me, we're gonna get to Pokemon music, but we have to discuss this first. So the chromatic notes, right? So the diatonic notes are in the keys, and the chromatic notes are not in the keys, and they can add tension and color to the music when you use them. The main thing he does, though, is the chromatic scale. He likes to use chromatic runs very often in his music, and we'll hear several examples of that. And it makes you feel unsettled when you have the whole chromatic series just played up or down. And that's an excerpt taken from the Wild Pokemon battle. So we'll listen to that soon. But it's not even just a chromatic scale. He modulates chromatically as well, which is not necessarily normal. He's not necessarily following all of functional harmony. He's using some things from modal harmony, also from chromatic ideas as well. So this is a chromatic progression. Okay, we're almost there. Modes. So Junichi Masuda is not scared of modes at all. He loves to use modes in his music. So what do I mean by that? So normally you have like a C major scale or C Ionian. That's all a sound that we've heard before. It's very familiar. But if you start the same pattern on a different note, you get a different sequence pretty much of intervals in between the notes. and that can make different sounds, and we call them modes. And certain modes he favors a lot more than others, specifically Mixolydian mode and Phrygian mode. So let's listen to what Mixolydian mode can sound like. Let's see Mixolydian. So the difference here is the flat 7. The flat 7 is different. In C, that's the B flat. So there's something kind of adventurous about that versus this. The leading tone is different. And then Phrygian mode is like your minor modes, but we have the flat 2nd. So let's listen to this one. So the flat 2 is the characteristic note of Phrygian mode, and it adds a lot of tension going from one note to another note very close, that minor 2nd. It adds a lot of crunch and tension. And because Masuda listened to a lot of like edgy music, like metal, the Shostakovich, the Stravinsky, like he likes those minor 2nds a lot, and he goes for it with the Phrygian. So why is that important? It's important because the modes help you bring out different emotions with the music, which is something he does, which we're going to hear very soon. Mixolydian mode, I feel, sounds triumphant. The flat 7 to 1 cadence, when it goes from flat 7 to 1, sounds very triumphant and heroic, whereas the Phrygian mode sounds very sinister and dark, very uneasy. And he uses both of these together to make that sense of triumph and uncertainty in Pokemon music. And I won't bore you with this, but just know you can build chords off of the modes too by stacking thirds. And for Phrygian, we have the flat 2 major chord, and with Mixolydian, we have the flat 7 major chord, and we'll hear those later. So these are form charts, something that another presenter will talk about soon. Actually, Eric is in the audience. He'll talk about that tomorrow in his talk, I'm sure, but this is a way of looking at music at the Video Game Music Institute. And it helps us look at all of the harmony all at once with some keys. You can look at the modulations. You can look at some arrangement notes. It's a very helpful tool in the overall structure of the piece. And just looking at these 2 tracks, so we have the Wild Pokemon Battle from Pokemon Gold and Silver, and with the Wild Pokemon Battle from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. You see a very similar structure with the 2-bar lead-in, and you can see Mixolydian and Phrygian together. So that was the main thing I wanted to point out there, is he uses both of these modes together. Rhythmic motifs, these are things you're going to hear a lot in Pokemon music. So rhythm is very important in all of music, of course, but Masuda went out of his way to pick these 2 specific rhythms and use them on almost all of his major tracks, and it almost unifies the whole sound of Pokemon, the sonic identity of Pokemon together. And I made a video to demonstrate this. So Pokemon battle rhythm, right? Da 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 da. That rhythm, the hemiola, you've heard that a lot in Pokemon, and here's just proof of it. I made a video.
This is the most important rhythm in Pokemon music.
So that Pokemon battle rhythm is what I called it, but other people would call it hemiola because it's a 3-to-2 ratio. Like, it's all over Pokemon music. And it's an intentional choice that he made to unify the sound together. And finally, very fast tempo, right? When I'm driving and I'm listening to Pokemon music, I'm likely to get a speeding ticket because I start accelerating so fast. Kirby does that to me too in Mega Man, but there's something about Pokemon music. And part of it is that fast tempo, especially the way these pieces start, right? With the chromatic runs that we'll listen to. So it evokes a sense of urgency, exhilaration, motion, intensity, danger, excitement. And Masuda is a master of bringing out emotions through his music. So in summary of his techniques, he favors the perfect fifth and the minor second intervals a lot in his melodic ideas in his music. He writes counterpoint or contrapuntal music. He uses chromaticism, whether that's chromatic runs, whether that's chromatic modulation. He definitely leans heavily into modes, Mixolydian mode, Phrygian mode. Mixolydian sounds triumphant, Phrygian sounds kind of sinister. These rhythmic motifs here. This one we're not going to talk about too much today, but this is from the main theme. He uses that a lot also in his music. And finally, fast tempo. So how did he combine his influences and his techniques together to write the Pokemon music that we all know and love? So that's what we're going to explore. So we're going to start with a very famous piece. This is the Pokemon Wild Battle from Red, Blue, and Yellow. So it's from Masuda. And it's one of the most iconic pieces of video game music. And we're going to look at how these techniques come into play in this track. Just 1 second. Okay. And right, one thing I wanted to point out is when you're playing Pokemon, especially in the older games, there's the wild encounters, right? So you don't know that you're going to necessarily encounter a Pokemon battle. You get surprised by it. It's a jump scare. And then there's this transition with the screen. So the music is synced up to that. So while you're listening to this, I want you to think of what techniques in Masuda's toolkit did you notice? So let's play this. Not that one. This one. So right there, right? What did you guys hear? Like anyone, you want to say something? Chromatic runs, definitely. Anything else? Oompas, kind of, right? With the prefix doo 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 doo. It's not quite the oompa because it doesn't have the chords, but he couldn't easily do that on chiptune. So I'll give it to you, sure. Anything else? Yes.
When there was a lot of space in the melody in the very beginning, the bass line came in with like a rising wall.
Exactly, right? So these are some things that Masuda does in his writing. This is the first battle, well, no, this is the second battle theme that you hear in the game. The first one is a trainer battle, but it's with your rival, so it doesn't count. You hear this for majority of the game, so this sets the blueprint for what Pokemon battle music sounds like. And of course, very fast tempo. In terms of the harmony, we have the Phrygian flat 2 again, so let's start over. Right here, we have our 1, and they're power chords, so it doesn't have the third, which is also unsettling, because then you can't figure out the tonality. So he does that on purpose. And he likes to move chromatically from the tonic to the flat 2, pretty much. Happens very often in the intro section of Pokemon music, even up till Gen 8. In terms of form, we have the 2-bar lead-in with the chromatic runs. There's many different variations of this. It could either be chromatic runs or arpeggios, and it's designed to make the player like immediately alert, like, oh, the gameplay context is changing. That's important. I should pay attention, which combines with the screen transition that I was talking about earlier. And it's probably inspired by Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest, if you're familiar with that. Who's familiar with Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest? Yeah. So you know how in Final Fantasy it's like so that's probably kind of inspired this, but who knows? In terms of melodies, we have a sequence, you know, do 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 do. So he's taking the same melodic idea and then rising it up, and it's a way to establish a motif. That's also the Pokemon battle rhythm, if you pointed that out. So It's, again, something that you'll hear very often in Pokemon music. You can roll a die and listen to it, because I've studied this a lot. You can roll a die and pick a random battle theme. You'll hear that a lot. Masuda likes to use broken chord melodies. Melodies build off of the chord tones, arpeggios, and he usually does this in weak sections, right? So this is right here. Right? So he's building it off of the chord tones, and he does it with longer durations. He does this in weak sections that aren't as busy as the stronger sections, I guess. So he typically does this towards the middle or end of a piece, and it's almost like a reprieve for the player. And I mean, that about sums up the wild battle. That's the first one. Now we're going to look at the. Oh, does someone want to say something? Okay, cool. So now we're going to listen to the trainer battle from Red, Blue, and Yellow. And this is also, again, one of the most iconic pieces of video game music. And we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to listen to it and then talk about like what techniques is at play here. And it's a very long piece. It's 4 pages. So let's play it. Those long stretches of chromatic runs and the rising chromatic, which adds a lot of tension. Modulating. Section. Subtle counterpoint. It's only one of the most iconic battle themes of all time. But did anyone point out any of Masuda's techniques or influences there?
Metal.
Yes.
I was gonna say that part thing where there's like.
The chromatic runs? Yeah, it's very apparent in his music. I wanted to start with the harmony, right? So when we look at the form chart, we see that we have the keys in B minor, but it goes to B Phrygian. So if we put that in, just so you get that sound. It's a very tense sound, you know. You oscillate around the B and C. And therefore we have the Phrygian flat too as well. In the key B minor, that's the C here. And we have a Phrygian section here as well when you modulate sound to A Phrygian. So that also sounds pretty dark and sinister. There's also a chromatically rising section. And he does that very often. You could turn on Pokemon X and Y, and he still does that too, where the harmony will rise chromatically and adds a lot of tension to music. We have our 2-bar lead in. That is very common in Pokemon music. It typically has this chromatic runs, like we said. Eminent danger, fast tempo, chromatic scale, chromatic runs, ascending and descending. We pointed that out. In terms of the rhythm, he has some of the Pokemon rhythm, doo-doo, but he modifies it. And why this piece is so iconic probably is because of all the different sections and how different they sound. With the Phrygian parts, with the counterpoint, some of the melodies are more elaborate than others, and then some are simpler than others. And that actually makes for interest because it's different. If everything was the same the whole time, you wouldn't be going on a journey pretty much, right? So think about that with your music. Yeah, and like I pointed out, the Pokemon battle rhythm is extensively in this piece, in altered forms, but it's still there. Yeah, we don't have to talk about the counterpoint too much. And the Oompa rhythm, or the perfect fifth bass line, you know, doo 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 doo, very common technique that Masuda likes to use. So, yeah. So that's from the chiptune era. Now we're going to shift gears to the GBA era. So now we're in 2003. We went from 1996 to 2003. So now we have access to some instrumentation with the Game Boy Advance. We're going to listen to the trainer battle from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. And let's see if these techniques show up here. What do you guys think of like that track? Now we have some instruments. It's easy to hear some things, right? So the structure of this piece, like I said, you know, starts in C Phrygian, goes to C Mixolydian, goes back to C Phrygian, and it does this back and forth, you know, triumph, tension. And I think that's what Pokemon music is known for, the battle music. It brings you through all these emotions as you're going through the battle, as it's, you know, a different dynamic state. And as such, not surprisingly, the core chords are, you know, 1, flat 2, and flat 7. C, D flat, and B flat, you know. Very fast tempo, 196 BPM, Pokemon battle rhythm, we had that a lot. So this one's more symphonic, so it's more like a host in that case. What are you guys' impressions of this track? You know, you like Ruby and Sapphire? You like instruments? You know, some people are biased for or against. What'd you say?
Do you like music at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I like the chiptune sounds. My favorite Pokemon soundtrack is Gold and Silver, but like, it's just a different timbre, different, you know, it's a different way.
So it's like the MIDI sound, just like the MIDI default stock sound, but it sounds really good.
It's iconic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those mini trumpets.
I think it's Roland 88 for Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. I think so. That sound font.
Was Ruby and Sapphire the first time they used tactile instruments?
Yeah, it's the first time they were able to even get access to instruments, basically for the core series games. So that's a huge technological leap in Game Boy to Game Boy Advance, as well as graphic. We talk about it more, but yeah. Okay. So now we're gonna go 3 more years into the future. So now we're in the DS, better hardware, right? So we have Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, and we're gonna listen to a wild Pokemon battle, Junichi Masuda, and again, listen to this. Now that we've identified like the elements of Pokemon music, see if you can hear and pick out the harmony. See if you can pick out the techniques that Masuda is using when he goes to compose this. That's a very, very iconic one. And, just for more context, I made a video to make it easier. So this is with the form chart. So we're gonna listen to the same beat, so this is with some annotations. So our 2-bar music, our 4 hits in the Pokemon battle rhythm there. More staccato rhythm. And the brass instruments. So yeah, like these are how we're connecting the musical ideas that Masuda is using as a composer, but then connecting it to the gameplay and emotion, right? Similar to film, like in games, when you're making music, you want to really elicit a certain emotional response from the player, and the techniques that you use in your music help you do that. And these are some of the ways. In this case, modes and the minor changes. And just to see the spoilers, to see the form chart in its entirety, like you can see the structure. We started with Phrygian, then we moved to Mixolydian, transpose up to D Mixolydian, transpose up again to E flat Mixolydian, goes back to Phrygian, goes back to Mixolydian. So he goes back and forth between those two, like I said, a lot. In many of the battle music, these are just few examples. But again, you could roll a die and find these techniques used a lot in Pokemon battle music. And I wanted to cap off with something more recent. So this is Pokemon X and Y, 2003. We have higher fidelity samples here. And this one is a full score, so it's gonna be a little tricky, but use your ears. I think your ears will guide you more than the sheet music. And I want, again, to listen to the techniques and hear how they're being applied to something more recent. So this is the trainer battle from X and Y. Oh, it's such a big score. Let's see. That's how he put that piece together, you know, in a loose way. Like, that's such a big score. I wish I had a piano reduced version. That's okay. So the key takeaway is, you know, Masuda's influenced by many different things. He's not just a one-trick pony. He's pulled from the common practice period. He's pulled from Russian music. He's pulled from techno, alternate rock, metal. And these are the techniques that he uses in his music a lot. Chromaticism, you know, making the player feel unnerved, very tense with the minor seconds. Counterpoint, so that there's multiple voices going at the same time, so that you have more intricate music. Modes, so that you can bring out the expression specifically for him. Phrygian mode, which sounds very dark and sinister in this context, and Mixolydian mode, which can sound triumphant when it comes back in with the flat 7/1 cadence. And then mixing these together. He doesn't just write one piece in Phrygian or Mixolydian. He goes back and forth, which tugs at your emotions. He has contrasting sections, so certain sections are more complex, certain sections are weaker or softer, and this also adds for emotional variety, which helps you go on an emotional journey with the music. Pokemon Battle Rhythm is like, if anything, know that he's used that a lot in his music. If you couldn't pick up anything else, the that rhythm is so common in Pokemon music. And he's known for very fast tempos. So if you wanted to learn more about this, I do have a full course on the music of Pokemon where we cover this in full. It's a lot cleaner than, you know, an on-the-spot delivery. It's 16 hours of high-quality content. We cover over 120 tracks, all 9 generations, 25 years, over 10 Pokemon composers. So we look at what happened after Masuda brought on more people to the team, people like Go Ichinose or Shota Kageyama, for example. And you know, there's live versions of this and there's also pre-recorded on-demand options. So if you're interested in that at all, you could DM me on LinkedIn. You can let me know after this, and we can get you set up. But otherwise, thanks for attending my talk. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments, like, about Pokemon music, about anything? Like, you want me to go back to any? Can you say that a little louder, please? Why did I choose to focus on Pokemon? So Junichi Masuda and Pokemon has, it's my favorite video game franchise, right? It has inspired me to do many things I do. It's why I got into programming. It's why I got into game design. It's why I got into music. It's why I got into math. Yes, that math with the symbols and stuff, right? Because I was playing competitive Pokemon and I wanted to understand how to get an advantage. So I started seeing symbols I did not learn in school, and they were very helpful. But yeah, that's why I focused on Pokemon, because I know the music very well, and it inspires me to write better music for video games. So I like to look at what Masuda did in Pokemon. Yes.
What's your favorite Pokemon track?
Favorite Pokemon track?
Yeah, song.
Ooh. Pokemon Trainer Battle, Gold and Silver. I think that's one of his best compositions. It's just so exhilarating. If we have, we have extra time, so I could play that if you want. Can analyze that on the spot too. But just, I want to go for it. Yes.
How do you feel about the remastering the soundtrack into Soul Silver and Dark Gold?
You know, okay, so the arrangers, right? It's very different. It takes on like a pop type of sound. I was not a fan of it at the time, but it's grown on me over time. Like, I really like the Baroque style counterpoint. So I really like the chiptune style in that sense. But I'm okay with it. It's not my favorite. I'm not a biggest fan, but like Viridian City is a great arrangement. That's one of my favorites. It's a close second to the Gold and Silver is Viridian City, the Heart Gold and Soul Silver arrangement. Like, I love bossa nova. That's my favorite genre of music. So, and you hear a lot of bossa nova in Pokemon. Anyone else before I do more? Yes.
What do you think of Lavender Town's music?
So that's a very popular one. Lavender Town does not use a lot of these techniques. It's one of the, and I analyzed it, like it doesn't fit his paradigm. So it's a very unusual piece. It's very slow and depressing, but I think he was inspired by film music, actually, like scary music. There's a few tritones in it, but other than that, it doesn't fit his paradigm. Yes?
What's your favorite Pokemon?
Alakazam. I like psychic types and grass types. Yes. Yes, go. So I covered them in my course as well. I think they're among the best Pokemon games that came out ever. Like, so that wasn't Masuda. That was Tsukasa Tawada, which I have a whole lecture on him in my class, and we do cover his music. It's he has different influences, like blues and jazz, so it makes a different sound. Chase.
So, I discovered this when I was in music theory class many years ago. I have a quiz question for you, rather.
Okay.
What is the block technique that Masuda uses in red and blue for the bicycle technique? I know it's on the spot. You just no pressure.
Maybe you should just go on YouTube and play that.
Yeah, like let's listen to it. So you don't have to like pull up the whole series in mind.
I know the music note for no. It's just like this one actually is Baroque influence and in Russian folk influence. They called it something else. Let me see.
Cycling.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, thank you. I don't know what specific technique that is. It's not around.
Sorry, no, it's not round.
No.
It's a very direct technique that Bach did his style of music in. It's directly lifted. So in theory, Eric wants to give you a hint. So when people make this up, is the hint. It starts with an I.
Improvisation.
Invention.
Invention.
Two-part invention.
Oh, wow. I don't know much about
Can you
invention
hear it?
just
Play
yet.
it again. You'll start to hear it.
What makes it an invention? No, but what about the counterpoint?
The two like melodies, specifically like interceding and interweaving, like that. I don't know.
Oh, okay. I will look more
Sounds
into
like
it.
two little machines like playing separately, but together at the same time, and they each kind of have their own spotlights and they trade off. It's almost like call and response.
Okay.
That's sort of what I heard.
That's what I think of when I think of counterpoint. So I didn't know there was a specific term for that. Thank you.
Neither did I.
Thank you. I know someone in the back had a question. Yes.
What website is this?
KH inside it. A classic. KH, like Kingdom Hearts, KH inside it. Oh my goodness. I used to, when I was younger, I would like download these and burn them to CDs and then play them. Oh my goodness. Yeah, but times are different now. But yeah, you know. Yes.
For like Gen 1, like on the DMG, like are there any tricks that he used, like any signature sort of like chiptune sort of techniques that he used, like the vibrato on some of the instruments, on some of the
So that's the thing. So these are game rips, so they don't have the post processing on top. But when you play the game itself, you hear some vibrato and reverb is added on as a post processing. But these are game rips, so we don't hear it in this one. And then if you go on YouTube, some people add it back or they do some other weird thing.
I can answer that for you if you want.
Yeah.
So the technique is typically an effects part, depending what tracker you're using. And so there's two techniques. You can either have, since you have 3 channels with the noise of that, you can oscillate them. So if this is one channel here, you'll have the main line of the instrument, and then you'll offset it by 1 to create that effect. Or you have an effects type of system, then the hex system will be like X, Y, something which will trigger that vibrato,
Right.
and then give you that effect too, for sure.
What? I did.
I was just wondering, like the pizzicato sort of sound that he has in one of the songs. Like, how does he do that on the DMG? Like, I don't know. He's really good.
Bits is cut off by an actual effects code.
Oh yeah, he just stops the
Right,
note.
it starts to know, and it's so like you can
It's
kind of
just
see
square
the
waves, right? It's just
Yeah, it's little signs, squares, and triangles.
Well, clearly he knows a lot about chiptune music.
no.
I'm a video game composer. I should know this stuff.
Right. I have a lot of analysis. But yeah, like, you know, in the full course, like we covered so much more Pokemon music, not even just the battle music. Like there's overworld music too, and we learn more about other composers as well. So it's a great experience.
Is it only chiptune you cover on your course, or is it
No, not at all. So it's the evolution of Pokemon music.
Because I was gonna ask how you feel about Pokemon music analysis. Okay, I don't know anything about music, but it feels different, and it's definitely, not what it used to be. But I don't know what I feel about it.
Your feeling is correct, and long story short, it's because this guy isn't making it. That's why, it's because Masuda's not making it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it means times are different, And I actually covered that in the course. I tracked the whole evolution. Like, I'm serious. It's over 120 tracks. So we start with the very first sounds you hear, which is the opening sequence. We analyze that, we give it a fair shake. and we go all the way up to the final battle of the most recent game, Scarlet and Violet. So there's a lot in between, and it's not just chiptune. It's orchestral, symphonic. There's even blues and jazz, bossa nova. There's a lot of genres in there as well. Because over time, the Pokemon team expanded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is, like, is there like need for like chiptune music? How can I like? Is it like a genre people enjoy and they still?
I think the times are just different. You know, like when you go to make a game now, if you have hyper realistic 3D graphics, it's hard to mesh that with the timbre of chiptune sounds because of just people's preconceived like connotation of, oh, okay, chiptune means like 80s, 90s type video games. Not to say that it's impossible, but I think they're more looking for like orchestral music nowadays, which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
Then there's a difference between the Japanese music and the Western audiences and their sensibilities. They'll go for different things. The Japanese music is more melodic and fast rhythmically. The Western music generally is more ambient, more orchestral, more ambient and orchestral. So it's a difference between the two.
Question.
Yes.
Would 8-bit type music be the same as chiptune type music?
I would say so.
Okay. Because I've seen where people will take today's music and convert it into 8-bit tunes.
All 8-bit is chiptune, but not all chiptune is 8-bit.
Right.
Okay.
Like there's 16-bit chiptunes, which use more channels. So remember, I was like, this one has 3 channels, but there's some that have 8 or more. Yeah, it just depends. I don't know if there's another panel after, but I do have time after, so yeah. Yes.
Since Kermit Tracker or like other modern trackers didn't exist back then, do you know how he composed like the original soundtracks for like what kind of?
I think they had a proprietary tool, and it probably looked worse than this, honestly. You probably had to program it in C++ in assembly with the hexadecimal. That's not fun. I'm a programmer. I can tell you that's not fun. Like, it's yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you all for coming.